First of all, I'd like to commend Karina and Mary for an outstanding paper. That I recommend to you most strongly. You've seen the talk. You have the digested version. I recommend you go to the full-blown paper, which is available, because it's well worth a read. And it makes a really quite compelling case, I think, as we've heard, for broadening the focus of the thinking that is very well embedded around value chains in the contexts of adding economic value, to think about it from a nutritional perspective. It's quite interesting if I think about the role of research in this. If you look, I'm a quantitative kind of person, so I looked at the 109-line description of the objectives of a value chain approach and counted how many times the words how, why, or what appear, and it's 30, which is one every 3 lines or so. That, to me, in itself is a crude testament to the really important role that research needs to play in thinking through and operationalising and learning as we go in adopting this or any other approach related to value chains. And I think I was struck by a couple of comments we heard in the last thing from Mark around there aren't any quick fixes. It is a slog. It's not easy. And we will go up dead ends. There will be blind alleys. And for me, the role that research plays in this nexus, this groping towards solutions, is one of trying to realise and help us understand when we're in those blind alleys and identify ways to take new avenues and also to accelerate the rate at which we get to solutions. So for me, the role of research in all this is around better and faster. And I'm really quite excited by some of the dialogue I've heard and some of the changes that are going on, I think, particularly in the international research community, around the partnerships and the nature of the engagement that people are now talking about and starting to operationalise to really bring research much more intimately into the development process in a way that I think will help us all accelerate those things. Now, in the context of this particular paper and research, I think I want to make 3 points. The first is about gender, which we've heard a lot about. I actually think the paper perhaps could have emphasised that more, and I want to talk about the central importance of gender in the context of a research agenda. The second point I want to talk about a little bit is post-harvest processing and handling. I think there is an argument that, I don't know, in some cases maybe not a value chain but a devalue chain in the way materials are post-harvest and handled post-harvest. And the third point concerns understanding and influencing consumers and the enormous benefits and dividends that will come from really trying to do that. And in a sense, this issue of gender, the first of my points, is one that I think is so important that I've tried to mainstream it through the rest of my talk. And I do that not because it's fashionable, but because I genuinely think that it is so central to understanding and bringing to an end this scourge of undernutrition and malnutrition. And I'm going to illustrate the 3 points shamelessly with fish examples. My only excuse for doing that is, first, that it's probably the only thing I know anything about. And second, my staff would kill me if I didn't. And in the context of fish value chains, you know, women are, even in fisheries where one naturally thinks of fishing as a male domain, it is a central role. About 46% of women in small-scale fisheries are active in the value chain. As participants across the value chain, 46% are women. And that's the tip of an iceberg if one thinks about fish farming and one thinks about other areas. And I suspect the same is true for vegetables. It's the same is true for many other animal source foods. And there's a huge research agenda here. We don't know that much about fish value chains or how best to improve them in the service of better nutrition. But it's clear that focusing on research effort on women in particular is going to be a key in filling those knowledge gaps. And it's also a key to finding new opportunities. A great example of that is work in Bangladesh that we've been engaged in recently, where women are very important fish farmers. And the market for fish is for big fish. People want to eat big fish. But, you know, there are lots of small indigenous fish that swim in those same ponds that are actually far more nutritious and valuable. And combining the growth of those larger fish for the market and income with small, nutrient-dense fish for home consumption is a really innovative and a new approach that is really starting to yield some benefits. And it's talking in and doing that in the context of a household and with women as the primary actors that really brings that to ground in a successful way. The second point about post-harvest processing and handling, I just want you to reflect. Think about the food in your pantry. You keep the rice in a jar. You keep the fruit and vegetables maybe in a basket somewhere cool, but you keep the animal source foods in the fridge. And there's broadly a correlation between the rate at which degradation of food quality occurs and the nutritional value of those foods. And in the context of fish, the spoilage is truly enormous. Wild-caught fish in the small-scale sector, very few artisanal fishermen throw fish away, but the proportion that spoil before they get to anybody's mouths is huge. We're talking 20 to 25%, up to 50%. And globally, that's 10 to 12 million tonnes of fish a year, which is an awful lot of highly nutritious food to be thrown away. Now, as Mark Rosegrant said this morning, that's not a quick fix, solving that problem. But it's certainly a really important way of increasing access to animal source foods, and we really need to invest more effort in finding better ways to fix that problem. That's technical work around cold chains, on processing, but also on the economics and incentives of adopting improved methods. But even where that's done, there's work to do. One of the best ways of preserving fish and adding nutritional value to food in Asia is with fish sauces. Yet the salt content of those fish sauces is enormous. We've not yet started to think about whether those processing methodologies can be adapted to address that issue. Dried fish, we talked a little bit about processing, and here's a classic example of devaluing the value chain when insecticides are used to prevent spoilage. Surely we can do better than that. And I think investing in how we do better is clearly a huge agenda for us. And the processing of fish more generally in the context of value chains, when rather than it all being processed and sold at a glut period of supply, actually working out the institutional arrangements that would allow you to add value and smooth supply such that greater income and greater purchasing power comes to small consumers. Finally, this issue of consumers, I think, is perhaps the one that I think is most profound, and where the value chain approach and the nutrition approach really starts to come to ground very, very clearly. I think that if we only understand better poor consumers' demands and preferences, their willingness to pay for nutritional quality, and the constraints on doing so, that's an absolute key to unlocking the potential of providing nutritious and balanced diets. And only when we start to do that can we tailor value chains to make that work. And women are crucial. Guess who decides what gets eaten? It's mum. And this story of Ruma is all too common. You know, Ruma prepares the evening meal, rice and fish curry. About 300 grams of fish, by the way, for the family. Now, she's got a husband. She's got an 18-month-old son. She's got a 3-year-old daughter, a 6-year-old son, and a mother-in-law. And they all have to be fed, and she can afford one heap of fish. The small dried fish are sold in heaps. And the vegetables come from her backyard. And the largest share goes to the husband. No fish is given to a younger son because she thinks he's probably a bit too young to be eating fish. The older son gets a reasonable proportion. The daughter gets very little. The older son asks for a second portion and is given it. And she, her daughter, and her mother-in-law get very little indeed. Now, they would all got more had fish been more affordable and more accessible. And if she'd been more aware of the needs of her children and herself, because at present has no reason to question the patterns of food distribution among her family. Understanding how that dynamic operates and the kind of interventions that are needed to shift it is an enormous research agenda that really does need to bring together the participatory research amongst the poor, the nutritionists, the marketing experts, and the partnership with the development actors, whether it be the World Food Programme, whether it be NGOs, which I think do have a huge role to play in this, is the absolute key to unlocking this opportunity. But we also have to spend some time thinking about how we make that sustainable. It's quite shocking that in Denmark, people are now realising that losing sight of encouraging your children to brush their teeth is meaning that children are no longer brushing their teeth as much as they used to. And similarly, the arguments about, in Britain, I remember go to work on an egg at one point as being a quite an important part of my growing up. Sustaining the adoption is also going to be a key challenge. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that I think this value chain approach does offer a really important added dimension, but it's only going to do so if we actively pursue that work from a nutritional perspective, and that means being really clear about the goals that we're trying for. And I think that's something that was echoed very strongly by Mark and Ken, and I think it's absolutely fundamental, is the clarity of the goals, and joined up activity will get us where we want to be. Thank you.